Blackbeard versus Shanks. If there's any battle that's been built up throughout all of One Piece, just waiting to happen, leaving the audience in anticipation for it for years, it's this one. Even with Oda's writing style of off-screening fights like with Akainu versus Aokiji in Punk Hazard, or flat out avoiding fights like with Blackbeard versus Dragon in Baltigo, I still feel strongly confident that this is a fight that is destined to happen. And today I'm going to give you guys my reasons as to why. And if you do get enjoyment out of today's video, then consider hitting that like and subscribe button. It helps me go a long way in making these videos for you guys. So the first reason I want to mention is the importance of this fight for Blackbeard's character. Say what you will about Law and Kid, but at the end of the day, Blackbeard is Luffy's one true rival. A man equal to Luffy, if not greater, in the actual competition for the One Piece. He's making just as many moves as Luffy in the world. He's progressing his strength at a rate just as great, and he's seen as an even greater threat to the world government and marines, being issued a bounty almost 1 billion berries higher than Luffy. He is Luffy's true rival and a direct parallel of Luffy from a character aspect had Luffy gone down the wrong path. So with Blackbeard being Luffy's ultimate rival and his ultimate fight for the One Piece come end of story, it's important from a writing aspect to keep his threat level higher than Luffy's at all times up until he gets to the final fight with Luffy. Blackbeard must enter that fight as the stronger man, or at least appearing as such, otherwise there is no obstacle for Luffy to overcome, no stakes high enough to deem it a worthy final showdown for the treasure of the One Piece. And with all the big moves Luffy has been making already, Blackbeard, in order to stay above Luffy up until that fight, will need to constantly outperform and outdo him. And we all know Luffy just pulled off the biggest feat in the series yet by taking down Yonko Kaido and being the head of the group responsible for both Kaido and Big Mom's fall and changing the landscape of Wano entirely. So what could Blackbeard do that could possibly outperform this? That's right, fighting, defeating, and ultimately killing Shanks. Now if you guys know me, you know what I think of Shanks and his strength, which is why I don't think Blackbeard will ever defeat Shanks clean. But if we look at his character, that's not who he is anyways. Everything Blackbeard has ever gotten or achieved, he did so with dirty tactics, literally backstabbing and killing Thatch to get the Yami Yami no Mi, sneaking and manipulating his way in and out of a world government alliance to use that to get the power and position he has now. Coming in last minute to the War of Marineford on a dying Whitebeard and ganging up on him with his crew to steal the kill and Whitebeard's fruit. Blackbeard has never done anything the straight way, and his fight with Shanks won't be any different. So with Blackbeard defeating and killing Shanks, it will be the last major feats and possibly major power up Blackbeard needs to make it clear he has surpassed even Gear 5 Luffy, which defeated Kaido, and he can enter their final fight together as the stronger and greater threat. And the second reason is that, in my opinion, for the story to progress from here, Shanks sadly has to be removed from the equation eventually. Flat out, Shanks is just too strong and too big a force of good in the story for the absolute chaos and evil needed toward the end to rise up. As menacing as Blackbeard has been in the story so far, as ruthless as Akainu is, there's always a limit to how far characters like this can go when someone like Shanks is around. Simply put, he seems to be the top dog above all, and whenever things get too far gone and the villains get too out of hand, we constantly see only one man is always there to put a stop to it. He was the one to intercept Kaido and save Marineford from being an even worse bloodbath than it already was. He was the one to stop Akainu's merciless rampage on every pirate at the Summit War. He was the one to force Blackbeard to say enough is enough and call it quits. He was the one to prevent the world government from seizing Wano immediately after their 20 years of cruelty was removed, and sending an admiral to destroy all the hard work and waiting they did for 20 years. He did all of that. And with how strong Shanks is and how much influence he seems to have over everybody, good or evil, I just can't see how the story can really push these villains from here on to the crazy levels they need to get to, with Shanks here always willing to show up and keep things from getting too far out of hand. I think somewhat of a good comparison to this would be Jiraiya from Naruto, but exaggerated to an even much greater degree. So with Shanks gone, not only does it remove the invisible ceiling on how far the chaos can really run with the evils of the world, but it would also give Luffy that extra boost and determination he would need in his final fight against Blackbeard. He'd be the man responsible for the deaths of both Ace and Shanks. Another reason I think Shanks is destined to die is because of how much Oda has teased him and Luffy meeting, and something about how we've been teased with it so far makes me believe it's never going to happen. Luffy reuniting with Shanks and giving back his hat would signal we are at the end, as that would mean Luffy has become a great pirate. And I just don't see that happening. I see it more likely that just as Luffy finally becomes the great pirate ready to give back the hat, Shanks is taken out and Luffy and us never get that moment that we all waited for. It would be extremely heartbreaking, and I think that's what will be needed for Luffy to reach that final stage. Even just from small things, like Luffy telling Law all the way back in Punk Hazard that he wants Shanks to be the final Yonko that he faces, and Shanks coming so close to meeting Luffy both in Marineford and in Wano, and even being asked by his crew members if he will see him, only for Shanks to turn it down. The whole thing just has a lot of death flags around Shanks if you ask me. And lastly, the third reason, and this one I think is the most important, and the reason I'm so confident they will have an actual on-screen fight in the story, is because of the insane level of build-up throughout the whole story of these two characters eventually clashing. I don't know if there's been a fight more built up across the years as much as this one. You can make the case for Zoro vs Mihawk, but that's not even build up as much as just blatantly established in the beginning without any doubt, and now we just have to wait until that day comes. But with Shanks and Blackbeard, it's like a volcano that's been building more and more tension over the years and is on the verge of erupting at any minute now. There's simply been too much invested into the storyline between these two for nothing to ever come out of it. They have a past from their childhood, well before Luffy and well before the timeline of One Piece even began. Blackbeard gave Shanks what's probably his most iconic trait aside from his red hair and his one arm, and of course I'm talking about the scar going down his eye. Every time we see Shanks' face, we're reminded of Blackbeard because of this, and I think Oda did that on purpose to show us how intertwined these two characters really are. In a way, there is no Shanks without Blackbeard, and there is no Blackbeard without Shanks. They feed off each other so well as characters, and both play big roles in why the other is who and how they are today. Some of Shanks' best moments have involved Blackbeard, and some of Blackbeard's best moments have involved Shanks. These two men go hand in hand. From Buggy telling Shanks as kids how Blackbeard never sleeps, to Blackbeard giving him his scar, to Shanks warning Whitebeard about the hidden dangers of Blackbeard, to both crews on the verge of a full-scale war only for Blackbeard to say he's not ready to fight Shanks just yet. There's been endless buildup of history and tension between these two pirates, both in the current timeline and already established for us before Luffy's journey even began. And at the end of the day, buildups must have climaxes, as they are building to something after all. If Shanks were to die elsewhere or Blackbeard were to be defeated before meeting Shanks, then all that buildup over the years between them would be for nothing. All their beef occurred prior to the current timeline, and we never saw any of it. From the get-go, their characters are established to have a dark history and strong disdain for one another. At least if the beef between them was shown in the current timeline, then that would at least be a better excuse to not have a clear climax. But since it was part of their character's establishment and pre-planned by Oda as part of the One Piece world's history given to us in subtle text, then Oda would only put this in here with a planned outcome in mind, so that when that climax and outcome arrive, we would all be well prepared knowing the history, context, and witnessing the intense battle between them. As of right now, we have established the history, with Shanks' scar and their fight in the past, the build-up, with Marineford face-off and everything we've seen in the current timeline. But none of these things matter without the finish. The finish is why the history and the build-up exists in the first place, because there is already an end in mind that needs a history for how the story will get there. This is a form of storytelling, working backwards with a finish in mind and then planning out how to introduce and establish these two characters' relationship dynamic, both with their history in the past and with their build-up in the present, to make full use of when that epic showdown were to finally take place. If I could try to make an example here, Think of Steph Curry, the basketball player. And him being the son of a former player and already starting off with great genetics for the sport would be similar to the history already established between Blackbeard and Shanks before the story timeline. Now with those genetics already established, Steph constantly practicing and working on his craft day after day harder than everyone else would be similar to all the work and buildup gone into Shanks versus Blackbeard in the present timeline that we actually get to see and invest in. And now with the history established and the work put in the present, imagine if Steph were to do all that and not play any games, to not show up to compete, to not get any beneficial use out of everything already put into the project of him becoming a great basketball player. That, to me, would be the same as Oda putting in all this to establish and to build tension between Shanks and Blackbeard and everything that has gone into that, only for nothing to ever come out of it when it's actually showtime. Then what was all of that for? So again, whether Shanks dies or not, I think is still up for debate, even though I think he will. But the fight itself between these two men, in my opinion, is destined to happen. Shanks was also the one to retrieve and take care of the bodies of Whitebeard and Ace after the war. And if he ends up being the third person dead by Blackbeard's actions, I think this would make that scene much more impactful in hindsight. So let me know what you guys think. Is Shanks versus Blackbeard likely to happen or not? If they fight, who comes out on top? And where does the story go after that? Let me know in the comments. Like and share the video, guys. Subscribe if you are new, and if you haven't already, check out this theory video on Bonnie, Kuma, and the Revolutionary Army that I think you guys will really like. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys over there.